Blisters are every runner's nightmare. They can pop up at any time during training or racing, and they're just generally a bit of a nightmare. I'm Anna, and today on the Running Channel, I'm going to give you some tips of how you can prevent yourself from getting blisters. Blisters are mostly caused by a damp environment, so that can be if you've got hot, sweaty feet, or if it's raining outside and therefore you've got damp feet. Then your foot starts rubbing, you can rub against your sock or your shoe, and your body's reaction to that friction and that rubbing is to build up fluid underneath the skin, and then a blister forms. Now, they are mostly pretty harmless, but if they don't get treated properly, you can end up with some pretty nasty infections. Take Calvin Coolidge Jr., for example. He was the son of an American president and had been out having official photographs taken all day. He then wanted to knock off and play a bit of tennis with his brother and didn't put any socks on with his shoes when he went to go and play. So when Calvin came indoors later, sure enough, he developed a blister from where his feet had been rubbing inside his shoes. He didn't really think anything of it and left it until it became infected. Now, a week later, Calvin actually died from blood poisoning. What? Now, I must point out, this was in 1924, so this was before antibiotics, but it's an important tale to remember, especially if you start popping your blisters with things that aren't sterilised and you don't use proper antiseptic creams and plasters to look after popped blisters. Now, there are a number of ways that you can prevent yourself from getting blisters whilst you're out running. Firstly, make sure you're wearing a pair of trainers that fit you properly. If they're too small, you could end up getting blisters on the end of your toes, which can end up in them going underneath your toes and your toenails falling off, which you definitely don't want. You need to make sure you've got about a thumb's width of room in the end of the toe box to make sure that your foot can move around freely, but not too much that it's slipping everywhere. Make sure you've got socks that fit you properly, so you don't want any extra material left over at the toes or at the heels. So when you're putting them on, make sure that they're on properly as well. Some people prefer to have socks that they fit each toe individually. That can work too. And also think about the material of your socks when you're getting them as well. You want a material that's going to wick sweat and moisture away from your foot, not something like cotton that's going to absorb the moisture and leave that sitting next to your foot. If you struggle with your feet overheating and sweating, there are a number of ways that you can deal with that. You could put some talcum powder on your feet before you put your socks on. You could even try antiperspirant as well. Just make sure that your feet are dry before you put your socks on if you are going to use that. Or you can use an anti-chafing balm that you would normally use on other parts of your body. Try that on your feet as well. Trim your toenails right down, especially if you're going out to run for a long time or you're going for a race. The corner of one of your nails could rub against the side of your next toe, and that can cause blisters, or it can also cut into your skin as well, causing your toes to bleed. So make sure you're looking after your feet in general. A trip to have a pedicure won't hurt, but just remember that calluses are actually your friends. So when you've got some hard skin on your feet, it does mean that you're less likely to get blisters in that area because it's built up over time the more you've been running. If you know that you're prone to getting blisters in certain places on your feet, like I know that I always get them on the arches of my feet, you can always take steps to prevent getting them in advance, like taping up your feet. So you can use something like a micropore tape or a rock tape and put that on your feet where you know that you would normally get those blisters. And what that does is it creates a barrier between your foot and the rubbing. So anything that might cause blisters, like the seam of a shoe, the seam of a sock, might be some grit or sand, whatever it is that causes that friction and rubs, that can cause blisters. And if you've taped up in advance, you've got that barrier to stop it. So here are some tips for you on how to successfully tape up your feet. Round the corners, rub the tape for about 20 to 30 seconds after you've applied it to the skin. That'll warm up the adhesive and make it more tacky, making sure it sticks better. Apply the tape at least an hour before you're racing, or even the night before, and that will allow the tape's adhesive time to bond with your skin. When using tapes, lay it onto the skin. The more stretch you apply, the more likely the tape is to come loose, especially in wet conditions. If you find you have got a blister, then there are a number of ways that you can deal with it. If it's quite small and it's not causing you any pain or anything and it's quite manageable, leave it as it is. Don't pop those ones. If you do, then you run the risk of letting the bacteria that would normally live on your skin into your blister. That can then become inflamed, which is pretty gross, and you don't want to do that. Similarly, if you've got a blood blister, leave that alone as well. Don't pop those because you run the risk of then infecting your bloodstreams. Just leave those ones where they are. If you've got a blister that's perhaps got a bit more fluid in it, it's a bit meatier, and you want to do something about it, then there are some ways that you can manage them at home, and here are some tips for that. So clean all around the surface of the blister and the skin. If an alcohol pad or disinfectant is available, then use it. You're less prone to infection if you can properly manage the blister while it's small and treatable. Large broken blisters are more prone to infection than smaller ones because there's a larger area of damaged and exposed skin. Now, you can puncture the blister with a sterilized needle, sharp scissors or scalpel. You might need to pop a couple or even 3 or 4 holes into it so you can properly drain the fluid out. Clean and dry the surface of the blister and the surrounding skin so you can stick a patch over it. Make sure the patch is bigger than the area of the blister itself so it can stick onto the skin. If you're trying to fix a toe, you're probably going to need to wrap the whole toe and possibly the one next to it too to stop the skin from that one rubbing on the next toe and then creating a new blister. Just one thing to point out here, we're not medical experts and this is only advice. If you found this video useful, don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time on the Running Channel.